Good evening. My name is Kelly Graves. The course Introduction to Sociology through Aspen University. This is a video assignment on Module 8, Social Change and Behavior. Society has changed over the past decade, from style to language and even our environmental resources. Give an example of how social changes has affected physical environment, population, innovation, diffusion, and mass media. Physical environment will be the first addressed. Sociologists refer to basic modifications in the norms of culture, structure, and social behavior over time, social changes. There have been tremendous social changes over the last decade on our planet. Physical environment, global warming, and its causes. Number one, carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel burning power plants. An ever-growing dependency that we have to electricity from coal-burning power plants produce and release vast amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. 40% of U.S. CO2 emissions come from the electricity production, while burning coal accounts for 93% of emissions from the electrical utility industry. Number two, carbon dioxide emission cause. Gasoline for transportation. Today's modern car culture and expectations for worldwide obtained products, transportation waste is responsible for approximately 33% of emissions in the United States. With the ever-growing population at an alarming rate, the demand for more cars and consumer goods means that we are increasing the use of fossil fuels for the transportation and the manufacturing. An important and a third cause of emissions is the methane from animals, agriculture, such as rice paddies and beef being grown for food consumption by society. Methane is another extremely potent greenhouse gas, ranking right behind CO2. When an organic matter is broken down by bacteria under the oxygen-starved conditions, such as in rice paddies, methane is produced. This process takes place in the intestines also of herbivorous animals, and with the increase in the amount of concentrated livestock production, the levels of methane released into the atmosphere is ever increasing. Another source of methane is a compound containing large amounts of methane trapped in the crystal structure of ice. And as methane escapes from the Arctic seabeds, the rate of global warming increases even more so. There's a vicious cycle. We're causing the ice to melt, due to all of the methane and all of the emissions in the air. And then, of course, the ice is melting, increasing the global warming rate significantly. Deforestation, especially in the tropical forests for wood pulp, and farmlands are also increasing fertilizers on croplands are causes also that are of global warming. The effects of global warming, we already discussed the melting of massive ice sheets in Antarctica and Greenland. Also, many nations around the world that it will be experiencing the effects of the rising sea levels, which could displace millions of people in the world. The severity of storms, such as hurricanes, cyclones, they're increasing also at tremendous rates. Scientists have come up with the firmest evidence so far that global warming will significantly increase the intensity of most extreme storms. The maximum wind speeds, the strongest tropical cyclones, they continue to increase significantly since being monitored closely in 1981. This is research published in Nature this week. Population. Social and economical indicators of development influence population growth, including birth rates and death rates, whilst physical and human factors affect population distribution in a country. The reason for rapid expansion is mainly due to the decrease in the global death rates, while birth rates remain very high. This meant that many people were being born than were dying, so the population, of course, increased. The difference between birth rates and death rates is called the natural increase. In developed countries, birth rates and death rates are low. However, they are increasing in the underdeveloped nations. In today's society. The greater number of inventions and creations from innovators, the greater frequency of discovery and invention. Therefore, as society builds, as our population grows, as we become more and more creative, the building of ideas on top of new ideas seems to just be endless. Diffusion. When a culture of society evolves some new inventions, a custom, or a trait, and it is passed on from one culture to the next, is called diffusion. In diffusion, there is a bombardment from one culture to another culture. And then mass media. Mass media is communication, whether it's written, whether it's broadcasted or spoken, that reaches a large audience. Mass media is a significant force in the modern culture, particularly in America. Sociologists refer to this as mediated culture, where media reflects and creates the culture. These messages promote not only products, but moods, attitudes, and a sense of what is and what is not important. Mass media makes possible a concept of celebrity. Without the ability of movies, magazines, news media to reach across thousands of miles, people could not become famous. In fact, the only political and business leaders, as well as a few notorious outlaws, were famous in the past. Only in recent times have actors, singers, other social elites become celebrities or stars, and that's thanks to the mass media. The occurrence of deviant behavior from social norms and culture values, which deviant behaviors is considered a part of the trend today, another part of mass media. The information revolution was and still is an important perspective in all social change. In your opinion, how has it changed society, and how do you feel it will change society in the future? This is question number 2. The use of internet and computers has generated world access to over 75% of American households that have access to the World Wide Web via internet and their computers, allowing access to world events, national news stories, education, food, clothing, anything that they wish to obtain. There seems to be a few, possibly nothing, that one could not access via the internet. I believe this will continue to magnify in the future with high demands of internet security, managing deviant behavior, and activity that occurs in the mysterious world of the internet. Cell phones, another major factor creating social change. When out in the public, I make a point wherever I go to watch those around me. Phones. Everybody has a phone in their nose. Everybody. Social skills are dwindling due to the electronic world that youth are being raised in. The human aspect of communication is being eliminated. I believe eventually students won't even be educated in a social setting. It'll be all online. Every pupil will sit in his own home with a monitor representing an instructor. FAs will come on teaching hundreds of students at one time, eliminating the cost of instructors that we're going to need in the world, eliminating the risk of sending your child to school and being shot up, eliminating a lot of safety concerns to parents these days. The electronic world will continue to replace human contact. I'm driven a lot, again, by fear of being out in society and the danger society offers. Third question, how has modernization changed many underdeveloped nations? In my opinion, modernization has not changed so much in the underdeveloped nations. Traditional values, that's what is valued in the underdeveloped nations. And those traditional values prevent economic growth and change. In today, in growing nations, in modern nations, we inspire change, and that encourages economic growth. Traditional values. Simple division of labor, less specified job roles. Individuals rely on a few dozen people in their local communities for basic needs to be met. That's an underdeveloped nation. In developed nations, complex division of labor, individuals tend to have very specialized jobs and rely on thousands of others for basic needs to be met. Underdeveloped nations, religious beliefs and tradition influence day-to-day lives, less so in developed nations, where rational decision-making are more important. In an underdeveloped nation, stronger community and family bonds exist, whereas in the developed nations, weaker community and weaker family bonds, creating more of an individual freedom. Organization is a current term for an old process, the process of social change, where less developed societies acquire characteristics common to more developed societies. The process is activated by international or intersocietal communication. As Karl Marx noted a century ago in the preface, the country that is more developed industrially only shows to the less developed the image of its own future. Every nation that is less developed but regards itself as developing receives the pictures transmitted by these more developed societies. They mimic us, the underdeveloped. It just takes, they're further behind. It takes more time to see change in the underdeveloped nations. 4. What are the types of social movements that have occurred in history? When and why did they occur? Movements are viewed by sociologists as an unrelenting, balanced attempt to bring about resist or change. Generally, this effort is supported by a large group or many individuals. Ideology is essential for the success of a social movement, providing purpose, rationale, and uniting individuals for that specific cause. Revolutionary movements support the replacement of an existing value scheme. For example, the Revolutionary War. British colonists feeling underrepresented in Great Britain's government, yet had to pay high taxes and obey rules without being allowed any input. 2. Reform movements are designed to make changes to current value schemes and that are believed that will better serve the current time or situation. For example, the Civil Rights Movement. They fought to extend democratic rights of African Americans. And then 3, resistant movements. They're meant to block change or switch back to a previous method. For example, the Ku Klux Klan, they were a resistant movement. They fought and they continue to fight to remove the rights of African Americans in our nation. Thank you very much. That concludes my report this evening.